Welcome, Reanimated fans. We're a week into the new year, and I'm H.A. Conrad here with my intrepid yet sleepy co-host, Stuart. Hello, Stuart.
5 more minutes.
I'm the same. I'm feeling the same. Just like, I don't know, that time of year. But, you know, we have been getting some fabulous sunsets here, so that's something. But today we're going to be talking about the last couple of episodes of The Walking Dead World Beyond. Before we get into that, we have a couple little news items to chat about. The one we had talked a little bit about, the All of Us Are Dead, and there's a new trailer out. And again, I'm pretty excited to see this thing. What about you, Stuart?
Man, this trailer has me pumped, especially, yep. I will say, with special mention to any riot police scenes. It looks like they have not spared the budget when it comes to putting a lot of dudes in riot gear on camera with a bunch of zombie extras. Wow.
A lot.
Yeah.
And
it reminds me of that first season of Fear the Walking Dead where they really did skimp on that budget, and it was like 4 cops versus 5 zombies.
Well, it actually made me think of the Train to Busan station scene, and that was not quite the same feel, but that idea where it's like you clearly can see that they've dedicated a ton of resources. My only pause on this is like, I know they're trying to get people pumped, and so obviously this is probably one of their biggest set pieces, but that's fine with me. I'm like, all right, I'm on board with this.
I see that as being a big one. There was another shot in this trailer of like just a CG mob of zombies from a top-down shot that looks really interesting too, like around the school. And then it looked like they're gonna have some cool like gunplay with the military or police, and it feels like it's going to be a real epic sort of film, as opposed to something that's like small and just based inside the school. I'm sure it'll be parts of both, but
yeah,
very excited about
it. So definitely getting even more excited for this.
What's the date on that? It's on Netflix, January 28th, I think.
Yeah, it's like at the very end of January. So we will be doing a review of that for sure. And then in other news, in other parts of the world, apparently in the UK, they are turning a Camelot themed former park into a zombie horror show or something like that. It's basically kind of like a themed cinema type thing, but they're going to have people that are, kind of walking around, I guess.
I think it's a two-parter. Yeah, like you go in with your buddies and you watch a zombie movie, like as a drive-in maybe, and then afterwards there's a trail or maybe a drive around.
Yeah. It's unclear whether it's sort of like vignettes of it or if people are actually like walking through almost like a haunted house type thing, but out in the open. I don't know. But regardless, I kind of think that, hey, if you're going to have an abandoned property, this seems like a good use to put it to. I kind of like the drive-in horror cinema part of it a lot. I think that's very cool.
I also find their timing of February and March to be very curious. Maybe this is their proof of concept, and then they'll trot it back out in October. But
maybe, but also if it's in a car, like if they're not sort of all out in the open, maybe that makes sense. But also if it is, maybe it's a COVID safe kind of thing. Like, so if it's just in the car and you're kind of driving around, then you're able to do that safely. So that might make sense. And
yeah, the map in this article makes it look like you're gonna drive around this trail in your car after you've done this drive-in movie. I think that sounds like a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope it's successful and that there's enough of an appetite for it. But let's see how it goes. I bet there will be more reviews of it coming up. We'll see.
I also dredged up a piece from a website called SoftRep that writes about military history sort of stuff, and the headline has zombie in it, so of course I click on it. That's what I'm wired for. But then it's this really gross story that actually kind of ties into some of this World Beyond stuff, because it's chlorine gas related. And it's this gross quote unquote true story from World War II of a Nazi attack on a Soviet fortress. They bombarded it with chlorine gas, which they haven't gone into too much detail on World Beyond, but it melts you from the inside out, kind of like Ebola.
Yep.
And then they like launched an infantry assault on the position after killing an estimated 1,600 people, just like in the first salvo. But then when these Germans were approaching the fortress, apparently they were met by Soviet soldiers with like blood-stained rags wrapped around their heads, coughing up their innards, but who still had a little bit of fight left in them. And so that's kind of the zombie piece of this story, is that the Germans turned around and ran screaming because a bunch of very close to death dudes were still putting up a fight. And it's a pretty horrific story from SoftRep. We'll have that link in the show notes if you want to check it out.
I also read this, and I actually wasn't going to put it in our show notes because
it was too real.
Well, I mean, yeah, a little bit. And chemical warfare is pretty horrible. And I had read about this particular thing before, and it's no less horrific the second read through. It's just pretty awful. But and then on the lighter side, there was like a listicle just about 10 different zombie films. Most is like familiar fodder that probably most people have seen. But there was a couple that I was like, oh, I haven't seen that yet, and that'd be pretty good to try to check it out. So we may delve into one of the movies on the list to sort of cleanse our palate from shows next time. So
yeah, there was a few on here that definitely recognizable ones, like Zombieland, Final Cut of the Dead, was it?
One Cut of the Dead, and then Dawn of the Dead, and Anna and the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
So a few familiar things in there. Dead Alive with Peter Jackson, and
Night of the Comet, which I don't remember being a laugh riot, but I mean, it was definitely a little lighthearted.
It was lighthearted compared to other stuff. So, and obviously, Army of Darkness and all that.
What's the deal with this getting published on Tor.com? What do you think that's about?
I don't know, but yeah, it's all good. But we'll check out what Creep Show, I think, was the one we had said we might take a gander at.
Oh yeah, Night of the Creeps, I believe.
Night of the Creeps, sorry.
Yeah.
Creep Show is something entirely different, another horror film.
That's a different sort of anthology situation.
Yep.
And then there was a really stupid listicle, which I don't know, HA, I'm a little bit I have some doubts about your judgment this morning.
No. I put this up here mainly because I was like,
to mock it.
Man, Screen Rant must be really stretching for some news or something. But also, I felt like if you're gonna do it, you should probably do it a little bit better than this was done. So it's basically a list of Disney princesses and ranked in in order of weakness, I guess, of how they would survive the zombie apocalypse, and the reasoning is mainly behind like how well they take direction and teamwork and stuff like that. And just gotta say, have to be Screen Rant. Not sure what's going on with y'all, but this is pretty disappointing.
and just for the sake of this list, they chose Sleeping Beauty to die first. That kind of makes a whole lot of sense. You don't have to think about it too long.
Sleeping, sure. I mean, that makes sense. That's fine.
And then they say Ariel, the mermaid, is going to live the longest because they're like, yeah, zombies sink and they can't swim, and she can swim. And I'm like, yeah, but I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but I'm pretty sure they lived on the bottom of the ocean. They didn't like.
Also, if it's a zombie world where you can make zombie sharks and such, this is a pretty difficult environment to live in. Who knows?
And zombie mermaids.
And mermen. So anyway, I thought that was just kind of silly and ridiculous, and was just very puzzled about its existence, and that somebody took time to even put that together seemed a little odd to me.
Sometimes it's just a slow week.
I guess so. But without further ado, let's jump into the last two episodes of Walking Dead World Beyond. And just a reminder that this is the end, the season, it's only supposed to be 2 seasons, right?
And Matthew Negrete's final sign off in his little explication on AMC Plus definitely made that clear. They're done. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel a little sad for him. Like he finally got to be the showrunner, and then it was a two season one and two and done. But I've been listening to a lot of Ty and That Guy recently, which is the Ty Frank and Wes Chatham podcast about The Expanse, or not really just about The Expanse. They kind of just wax about all kinds of stuff. But Ty, who was the author, one of the authors behind the Expanse novels, and you know what I'm talking about, right, Mitchie?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's also the, one of the producers, or maybe an executive producer for the TV show The Expanse. And so he's talking a lot about like how you make shows and what works and what doesn't work. And he was saying like, look, if you want to get your hands on some good actors, sometimes it's helpful to say, look, you're going to be a series regular or a recurring cast member, and it's going to be just 2 seasons and you're done, or just a couple of episodes and then you're out, because it makes it easier for them to schedule
other
their
stuff.
work. Yeah. And if they're in demand, they're like, that's kind of a good thing to come to the table with as a producer when you're putting a show together. And so maybe in some universe, putting this cast together, I don't know though, because a lot of these folks, other than Annette Mahendru and Julia Ormond, and I guess Pollyanna McIntosh, but she's kind of devoted to this universe.
Right.
Not a whole lot of names that I
No.
knew before this series, but I'm trying to think of reasons why this might have been a good thing. I think for anybody to get series regular, I think that's really good for your resume as an actor. And a lot of these people got to say that, right? Like the sisters, Felix, Silas, and Elton, and various and sundry other folks.
Yeah, I suppose so. I have no, like, here's the thing. I have no problem with, you and I have talked about this before, and I do think that there is some merit in the way that sometimes like UK series do this, where they're like, okay, we're only going to have 2 or 3 seasons and that's it. And, BBC Office did that.
Yeah. And those seasons are like 5 episodes. It's
right,
like random.
I mean, and the thing is that it forces the creators to do, first of all, everything has to be planned out incredibly well. You don't run into a Lost situation where you're trying to retrofit different things in. And I mean,
story bloat. Yeah. Like thinking of In the Flesh, right?
Yeah. In the Flesh is very, and honestly, I wish they had just one more season possibly of that, but it was fine where it ended. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there is some merit to that. I will comment that just for this particular series, this didn't feel like that's what happened, at least to me. I think that there was just a lot that they left. It still felt like there was bloat, or it felt like there was like a pacing issue in a lot of this. And then there is one specific thing that did make me chuckle in this finale, or not in I guess it was in the final episode, but that kind of shows that it wasn't thought out. But I'm okay with this ending, and I guess they did the best they could to kind of wrap it up. But we had kind of high hopes that, I think one of the things that I wanted to see, we wanted to see a little bit of the world outside of what we had seen, and we got a little bit of that. I would say that one of the best things is the post-credit scene in this whole thing, and that was probably the thing I was the most excited about throughout this entire series. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, that blew the doors off in a way, and I know that there's been a lot of talk on the internet about that too, because it introduces potentially a new zombie, for Christ's sake, right? Like, but let's talk about that at the very end. But yeah, so, and also they got Dr. Jenner back. But yeah, let's. And I was kind of hoping that, because I'd heard that he had a cameo, the guy who plays Dr. Jenner, I forget his name, but I was hoping that he would have a scene with Huck, because then they would have their
the Americans, right?
The Americans reunion, but no. So I doubt they were ever on set together. So like, the show is over. Do you have a bad taste in your mouth from it, or did you part amicably?
I mean, I didn't have like a bad taste in my mouth per se. I think an annoyed taste in my mouth is kind of
an annoyed taste.
I don't even know what that would be. I don't know. I'm not bees. Like, what?
Like a bunch of bees.
kind of. I just like I really wanted there to be some kind of I think that one of the things that just grated me and understanding that I'm not necessarily the target audience for the show, although I could have been and I could have enjoyed it a lot more if they had changed a few things, but there is this it's mainly with Iris as a character, but all the characters do this to a certain extent. She just does it the most. It's these weird broad statements where it's like really kind of like unrealistic things that are going on, like, we're going to take down this whole military thing because we are, and that kind of statement
Yeah.
drives me nuts.
Well,
And
yeah.
they did so much of that in this, and not just that, but there were situations in these last two episodes where there is absolutely no way that this group of people would have gone like would have been able to do what they did. There's definitely no way that they would have been able, like, even how they were leveraging getting out of this whole situation didn't make sense. I certainly don't believe that Jadis would have let them go in the way that she did. And considering their superior force and skill, like I just don't buy it. So um anyway, so that's sort of my, I probably should have left that till the end, but that is sort of my feeling about it. And part of me after seeing the post-credit scene was like, gosh, why didn't they just do this show? Which,
that show would have been better, except lose the guy who can't actually speak French. I don't know what they were thinking with that guy. But yeah, again, we should leave that to the end.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
talk about episode Death and the Dead. These were both directed by both of these episodes at the end of the season were directed by Lauren Yaconelli. And this one was written by Aaron Martin and Sam Reynolds. And it picks up right where the last one just stopped, like where they'd locked themselves in that chamber, then escaped through the floor somehow.
Mhm.
Uh, so it starts with these, what I wrote in my notes as zombie IEDs.
Yeah, basically.
So the sure, that's smart. I'm glad that they're showing that these scientists are actually smart. And I was proven wrong in many of my predictions for
Me
this in
too.
these two episodes. Some of the people died who I thought were going to die, but not by the people who I thought they were going to die from. Um, yeah,
I
so kind of interesting.
really, I really, really thought throughout this that Will was gonna die. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was that was my I also thought he was gonna turn out to be like a double agent and that was gonna somehow play into it. And I was wrong on that count. So
They left a lot of pieces on the board by the end of the series that I don't know if they're going to make any use of them in the future, but I guess they're out there. So we do have that zombie ID scene or series of scenes where you kind of start to see Jadis getting rattled too, which is
yep,
nice because too often she's way too composed, and I
yep.
did like seeing her at least kind of losing it a little bit. Um, and you've also got a nice scene of Elton and Silas pulling a
Yep.
bullet out of Dennis. Um, yeah, I'm not a surgeon or I don't really know anything about medicine, but I don't know that where he was shot was a fatal wound.
Yeah, I mean you can't leave a bullet in there. So I guess
Sure,
that's fine.
they took that bullet out, but then they got him antibiotics. I don't know, maybe they didn't show him suturing it or anything,
Right.
but he seemed to have everything he should have needed
Right.
considering he got shot in like the obliques or whatever that muscle is. It didn't look like it was I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. Maybe there is an organ right there, but they even talk about like he's like, you miss my kidney by an inch or something like, or no, if you
Yeah.
nip my intestines, that'll be it for me. But then, yeah, like spoiler alert, he doesn't make it to the end of the show from
Right.
this one wound. Nothing else really happens to him. Maybe it's actually just sadness is what he dies from. Also, the bullet in the face.
Could be true. But then this leads me to my, so we go through this whole thing with him and Dennis and Silas, and they're leading the herd to the research facility. They do a little bit of a side trip to try to get him antibiotics. And I do like the two of them working together again. I think that was very good. I also like the fact that they run into the former Silas's former coworker and they have to figure out a way out. Even the way out is pretty like ridiculous, but also kind of funny.
It's honestly, this is like the kind of stuff this show should have been all about.
Right. And I enjoyed that much more than a lot of the other pieces of these episodes. The Silas and Elton scenes I thought were some of the strongest.
I mean, HA, it's an Elton scene. We have been nothing but consistent.
True.
On our love of Elton and every scene that he's in.
Right. And look, he's a great actor, but also these two have a great chemistry together. So I think that
they let Silas breathe finally. Like he was finally allowed to emote in these 2 episodes.
Right.
And so he starts to like respond to people and give advice and say encouraging things to Dennis and later to Iris. And you're just like, oh, you're an actual person. Like so much of the time they just had him being like a monolith who could hold up giant piles of tires but then the rest of the time like was staring at his hands and having flashbacks. They only let him really breathe as a character these last 2 episodes. I felt like that was a giant waste.
Although I do like, I like the interactions between him and Dennis, and you believe that he cares about Dennis because Dennis is probably the only person that has shown him any amount of like caring or like, isn't using him basically.
His uncle was not a bad guy. Not that
but we don't see as much of that. We see a little bit of them together, but not at least in this show. We have actually seen him and Dennis build their relationship. So
the show had no interest in building up his uncle as a character, even though in theory he was a nice dude who took him in when he was accused of murder and gave him a job and a place to live. And then they were like, oh, we're gonna kill him anyway, so let's not. So I don't know. Like in terms of lore for Silas, I never felt like he was that well developed because there were some holes. But I agree. Dennis was the best camp counselor Silas had ever had. And so the guy playing Dennis was extremely empathetic or sympathetic as a character.
Right. And then we have our other group that are somehow, getting one over on Jadis again.
It's a really complicated plan, like the scientists all leave in the trucks, kind of like that felt like a trap. I was like, okay, they're probably going to die now, but they didn't. It was unexpected. Like you said, weird that Jadis would have let them all leave. And then Felix and Hope go off on one mission. Iris and Percy stay in the Belshaw's lab with Mason and start talking about the future. And so at this point, it's pretty easy to call that Percy's not going to make it, right?
Yeah. I mean, that seems pretty clear. And fine. I don't think that, I don't think it's a huge shock. And I think that there is like, it's sort of the plan all along to get the kids, the original, the OG group of kids together. And that's, kind of the deal. And with Percy out of the way, you've got the romantic interest of Iris out of the way. You've got, that going on. But, and, that sort of frees up Silas to some extent to actually like work with them together. That, it's kind of short-lived, obviously. But
I mean, looking forward into these 2 episodes, when Percy inevitably dies, Iris is affected for, I don't know, like 10 minutes of story time. And then she seems to kind of like just get over it basically. And then she's all about the mission again. Right. And and then Silas is cheering her up. And I do just continue to dislike her character. Yeah. It's like you said, it's those grand statements about like things that are unbelievably unrealistic for a kid.
By the way, it's not the actor's fault. She's actually really good. It's the writing, I think, that's the issue. And even like, and let's talk about Percy dying. I mean, there was no reason. The whole way it went down was stupid. Having Mason as hostage, and you've got a bunch of sharpshooters like that could take any of and all of these people out in about 5 seconds flat. Mm-hmm. Like they don't have enough of a hold on Mason for that. Like it's just ridiculous. And so that just felt totally, and also even that scene kind of felt like it was like in slow motion. It's like, okay, Mason slowly break away and run,
Oh, there
like
was slow motion in that scene because when she looks around from shooting that one guy, and then pan like I think there's a cut, but her look around was in slow mo to
uh,
look at Percy's prone body. Also,
but
were you not screaming at your screen about the fact that that scene was on walkie-talkie, although they could hear
yes,
each other
yes, I
speaking?
was my favorite terrible
What was
crutch.
even the point of that? Was it like bad set? Like, did they not scout the right set for that scene to take place? Because Jadis is like, turn to channel 313, go on
Oh,
secure, and then they just talk to each other audibly.
it was weird and silly. So there's that. And so there's the big, for me it was like I just didn't believe that this group was going to get away. So there was that. And not just that, but okay, let's talk about the big plan. The big plan is that Leo and the scientists are taking all this research. They're going to go into hiding. The CRM has had, knowledge, reconnaissance of this whole area for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And their big idea is to go to Cornell, basically. And
Well, a mall near Cornell, I
all
guess.
near, but regardless, it's not like the CRM doesn't have resources and many more resources to track down this sort of like ragtag group of scientists who are taking, like they, it just seems ridiculous to me. I mean, they managed to track down this group of kids that's been traveling across country. And granted, they have Huck as a little bit of a mole there, but even so, like they know this area really well, and they've had all sorts of things in place in order to safeguard their research facility. So that to me just seemed completely ridiculous that that's what they were going to do. So that didn't, I wasn't psyched about that wrap up piece of it. And then, we've also got the Huck storyline, which is she figures out where they have moved all the chlorine gas, and she does have a timer. And like, what did you think about this exit for Huck?
She definitely plays that hand badly because she gives Jadis enough time to get away. Like, if she
Right.
hadn't said anything, she could have Jadis and her men would have been looking around for other people and would have been caught in the explosion. So I mean, they wanted Jadis to get away. So why not have Pierce come and kill
Right.
Huck? Like, I kind of thought it was going to be a face off between those two, but there was obviously a lot going on with Jadis there too. But you could have had Pierce just die in the explosion, and Jadis not have to. I don't know. Like, it felt really sloppy because Huck went to all the trouble to set up a timer and then let her know when it was going to go off. Essentially, it was
Right. She could
dumb.
have just said nothing. She never would have known.
Yep.
Um, but in terms of like, I don't know, like the big reveals in these episodes, finally we understand why they've been doing this big call, but it still doesn't make total sense to me because, you know, their their reasoning behind it doesn't seem completely sound.
So
Um,
resources. It comes down to resources,
yeah.
which apparently Portland and Omaha are not self-sustaining and can't become self-sustaining. Um,
And they
maybe we believe that, but
maybe
200,000 mouths to feed. How would that not be a bigger issue that everybody understands other than just the military? Like, it also,
right.
like, I don't know. It's a reasonable sort of uh problem.
I think that the unreasonable part of it and the part that I was just having a hard time um figure like, okay, okay, like I get it, resources, and this is your decision to do these things so that in their minds, so that the other groups can survive, and that they pulled the quote unquote talent. And at the campus colony, apparently the only people we're taking out of there was Leo and um
Hope, really.
Hope.
The others were all collateral.
And yet you still had people doing research and all this other stuff. Like, I just can't believe out of a population of the size that they're talking about eliminating, that you would not have other people that are capable of problem solving and sustainability.
And we're also
And then
talking about 10 years post apocalypse.
Yeah,
And
I
how
don't
have
know.
these communities not had this problem
Before.
in year 2 as
Right.
opposed to year 12 or whenever they think it's going to happen? Like Omaha must have had crops to make it at all.
Right.
97,000 people or whatever it was. Like that. Yeah, it is it's
Well, I
a
guess the bigger question is like, how did they have? And we said the same thing when we were talking about what's the other the why are we um the thing in Virginia. What is it? I can't remember. This is killing me. In The Walking Dead,
what do you what's the
the outfit,
context?
like with the community there that we just watched with what's his face with
Alexandria, Hilltop,
yeah,
the
like
Saviors,
no, the new thing that they all got
the
taken in by that
Reapers,
no, the next
oh, the Commonwealth.
yes, the Commonwealth.
Yeah,
I
they've
kept
never shown their fields, right? Yeah. And they have to do that more on this show because otherwise, well, if they don't, maybe then they can just say things like, "Oh, we were going to run out of resources. Not now, not
well,
tomorrow, but
well,
one
so my
day."
point was is that when we saw sort of certain things in the Commonwealth, things did not, at least for me, they didn't jibe because you've got people that have been living through what they've been living through in the past decade. And I just don't buy that they would live in this sort of wasteful way that they seem to be living.
Oh yeah, and the sweater vests and the bakeries, yeah.
Right. And also, all of the things that it would take to sustain said things, they're not showing us enough of how it might work. I know in this show they did a little bit of that. Like we got some sort of like wide shots of sort of a outpost when we were, looking at like the CR. And they would comment on things, but we didn't get to see enough of the details that I think that would be better to see or at least helpful to see. Because also it's like if it's a resources issue and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, I just don't buy that it would be not clear to people that this is what would be happening. Um, or figuring out ways to support such a community or figuring out birth control and all those things if it's like a population numbers issue.
Yeah.
It just feels a little too convenient about that point.
And
And
with the CR, how could they not have been able to just like put, I don't know, 10 or 20,000 people into intensive farming in Nebraska? Like
right,
that's a thing you can
that's
do.
what's sort of like weird about it. So anyway, so I think they sort of tried to answer that and didn't, to me, didn't successfully answer that
It was a
issue.
huge ask. Like what they did needed something bigger even than what they proposed as the solution. And like our heroes, quote unquote, didn't accept that explanation anyway.
Well, they
Um,
didn't. And the other part of it that is problematic is that clearly the people who were asked to execute said order, that's part of why they ended up as lab subjects. Like, so that one guy that we saw that Lila was experimenting on with somebody that basically was like, disagreed with that. And if if one person knows the secret, maybe you're all right, but they have multiple people who have known the secret and a lot of people who objected to it, apparently. So that was kind of a weird, not weird, but implausible to me that they would be able to keep this secret for so long,
and Huck makes that point to Jadis, when they're in her office and they're like, "Oh man, why is this all happening? Why have the scientists left?" I thought you said that Hope and Iris were going to join our team, or not, maybe not Iris, but Hope. And she was like, "Yeah, she was on board, but then she found out that you killed everybody that she ever knew, and it's not my fault that CR couldn't keep a lid on that." And I'm like, that's a really strong point, Huck.
right?
Jadis also makes a really strong point in one of these scenes where she's talking to Iris on the radio, where she basically just tells Iris that she's an angsty teenager and that she's pathetic. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel too, Jadis. Thank you for speaking my truth. I was kind of happy to hear her talk down to Iris that way, because it was just like, yeah, she is basically just coming after you because she's mad, but also you did commit murder on a massive scale.
Right. One yeah, and so there were, and then the other piece of this is that like even though they are taking care of this um chlorine gas situation, and sure, it's in this particular case they're going to get rid of what is immediately available, but they've already said that it's pretty easy to make. So even though they're taking care of this right now,
Hmm.
there's nothing that is going to stop them for making more, other than like, and then they're going to go and warm Portland, which ultimately is kind of where they end up at the end, is that they're going to fight the good fight and, you know, fight against the CRM and which is fine, but it just, you know, this all just is, it's hard to swallow the
Yeah.
whole.
And like you said, Iris makes these statements at the end of the show when she's leaving the mall and she's telling her dad and these other people. She's like, "Yeah, I'm not saying goodbye forever. I'm just going to go to Portland." And they're in New York. And unless they're talking about Portland, Maine, that's a long
Right.
long way to go. And they're just going to
And
hand
I guess
wave it.
I assumed that they were talking about Portland, Oregon.
I did too, and I think that's what they were talking about because
Okay.
that skyline looks pretty big at the end. I don't know how big Portland, Maine is, and I don't think it's a big city. Um,
But in terms of like
but
things,
the hand wave, no, sorry, the statements she's making at when she's about to leave, she's like, "It's not gone. I'm not going to go forever. I'm going to come back with allies from Portland." She's like, I don't know, 17-year-old kid.
yeah,
And I don't know, that's just like the confidence of youth, man. Like, yeah, we can do anything, putting our minds to it. We can go to war with the CR. But it's just such an absurd thing to say. You don't
right.
know. You've never been there. You don't know these people. They might just
And
shoot you
look,
as soon as you get there.
and also look, I mean, the CR knows you're out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw how well you got through before, so I just don't have any huge faith in her skills of like navigating the country in this particular like
If Felix
environment.
says that she's a fighter, don't
Oh
you
yeah,
believe
but
Felix
so
and
by
his?
saying it, that's clearly true. But you know, I will say that in terms of a funny slash good scene, I did enjoy the fight scene between um Felix and, you know, his nemesis, Frank.
Newton?
Yep.
Newton plays dirty.
He does play dirty, but then so does Felix, and I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I
Except
did.
Newton was doing all this psyops, and Felix was just like, "Nah, dude, I'm gonna do one. I'm gonna do you one better." I did
Yeah,
like
and
that. That was
I
pretty
thought that
funny.
that was a great scene. So I
The
did
Darth
enjoy,
Maul thing was a little hokey, I thought.
which was a little hooky. Sorry.
The Darth Maul
Oh yeah,
double-sided
that was
walking
silly.
stick.
Yeah. But you know, that's kind of like, um, you know, that was a highlight to me. And he just kind of leaves him to get taken down by the walkers. He just lets them all out, which I thought was awesome.
Well, he
But
ends up
you know,
killing him. He doesn't just leave him to
no,
get
no, no.
eaten.
He's disemboweled him. So there's that wonderful intestines scene that we were waiting for.
Those are always fun.
Always good. But the thing that I was referring to before is like, you know, the beginning, they sort of tried to retrofit this scene with Elton and Iris
Mm.
and Silas as like to be before they went out on their big journey, but clearly they did not film this until now because Elton is like huge in this scene.
Did you watch the Matthew Negrete thing at the end?
I did not.
He calls it out. He's like, "Look, I realized that Elton's 2 feet taller than he was before, and I hope that you can forgive us for trying to put him back into this retrospective flashback." I was like,
But this is
"Man,
my point about the
yeah."
fact that they didn't really think about how this was
They
all going to
they
kind of
did
come.
not think what shots they were going to use for 2 seasons. Like, I mean, that's a huge job, but it's
But
kind of the showrunner's job, isn't it?
it's a showrunner's job, and to me, that's like if you like you shouldn't like if you only have 2 seasons and only have 2 seasons to map things out, then yeah, I do think they should have thought of that.
You can storyboard 20 episodes.
I think they got to the end of this and they were like, how do we make this have more weight? And okay, we're gonna film this implausibly. I mean, at least they could have put the other three up on boxes or something to make Elton look shorter.
I honestly think they did do that.
Well, anyway, there was that whole thing, and the whole idea that these four are somehow the linchpins. It just doesn't hit, in my opinion. What they're trying to do is to show you this link, this powerful link between this original
Oh yeah.
band and that they are capable of pulling all of this off, and that by their like weird optimism and whatever, that they're going to be able to be successful. But I just don't really buy it.
Well,
It
it
doesn't.
feels revisionist,
Yeah.
like Iris saying we're just going to promise to always have each other's backs. But let's not forget that Silas was ostracized and kicked out of the group
Right.
for suspicion of murdering Pete and Percy. And that was a big thing that happened last season. And they do refer to it here and there, but I feel like Iris has never had to pay full freight for that, because I don't remember if she was really the one trying to kick him out. It was mostly Huck, but I think Iris was on board with that idea.
Oh yeah, she was on board, and she was very much like, oh, I don't even know who you are, and all that BS, and he
Yeah.
was really hurt by it. And
But
it.
Silas is such a stand-up guy that he just is willing to, so yeah, I think it's revisionist and it's kind of BS. It's this like, oh, they're linked, they're Taviran, to steal a term from Wheel of Time. And that was a bunch of bull.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that don't really add up, do you really think that Jadis could beat Huck in
No.
a hand-to-hand combat?
Nope, not at all.
Do you think that Huck, being someone who doesn't necessarily want, I mean, I guess she does want to die because she had set a timer to blow herself up. Why would she give Jadis a weapon?
Exactly. I didn't buy this whole thing. And
Huck
so really,
Huck was a Marine and then a CR soldier. Like
right.
she wasn't I don't remember what Jadis was, but was she an art teacher before I don't remember. I don't know if we've been told what she did before, but then she was an artist colony junk person.
Yep.
And then she has since become a soldier, like in her 40s or however old she was supposed to be at the end of Rick's storyline.
Right.
There's no chance. I'm sorry. There's no chance. I don't care what a natural she might be, that she would be able to beat a Marine in hand-to-hand combat who's probably a good 10 years younger than her.
Yeah. I definitely don't buy it, given all Huck's training and what we've seen her capable of. I also just, again, this was like this whole thing. She could have set the timer, and she could certainly have gone with Silas and Dennis. And it, like, this whole logic doesn't make any sense to me.
That's an excellent point that I hadn't even gotten there. Like, yeah, how she could have set the watch. I don't know how you set a watch to set off a bomb, but maybe if it's like you have 60 minutes, I would think is probably the extent of it. Like,
right. But
from
she'd
noon.
already said it. So it was like, what are you doing? And they wouldn't have discovered it. It's this tiny thing on, clearly Jadis didn't know it was there.
Yeah. And they had, how many of those, containers were there?
Right. So many.
Stupid.
So there's that. And then the final scene with Dennis and Silas, again, like suddenly Dennis goes downhill really fast, and they see the whole explosion, and obviously he's bereft. He's like, oh, she knew I was dying. And I had the same thought you did, Stuart. I was like, how did she, what was he dying from? I thought he was okay now.
I mean, he spent a little time on the couch, then he got up. He seemed to be doing much better. And then as soon as they got to that house, he started to bleed more, I guess. And maybe that's possible. Maybe like something cut something inside, or I don't know. But that just felt a little convenient.
It did. And and then even his plot to sort of save Silas is, at least he acknowledges flat out that there's a very small chance and it probably won't work, but it's
and
best.
it doesn't, which is also pretty, like, I'm props to the show for that, is Jadis seeing right through Silas's story and saying, I don't care, you're gonna be my little special pet project. Honestly, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like Silas, I don't know how malleable he is. He's proven to be, I think, a little more resilient. But if you're under the thumb of a someone who likes indoctrinating people, like Jadis clearly does,
right?
Ooh, that's honestly kind of scary. And that's another, I would say, good thing that this show finally serves up.
Yeah, and I was definitely like, to see him at the end, I thought that was solid. I like that she did not buy his story.
Funny.
it was pretty good because it was immediate. And so I
Yeah.
was like, all right, I'm all right with that. But and seeing him at the end sort of in the gear was pretty good. So I was all right with that end of things. And then of course you have the idea that he's still his own man or whatever, and because he kind of implies that you can't lose yourself and that kind of thing, and Dennis says that too to him. So
It's like the last thing he said to him, right before he
yeah,
shot him.
that he
Yeah,
still
hardcore.
be himself. But in
What would
any
have
case,
happened? Oh, also, Asha is totally to blame for Elton only having one arm,
yep,
because she
she
took his
took
damn tuffy
away
stitch.
Puffy Stitch.
So that's tragic. It was also pretty pathetic that a zombie got that close to them without them noticing.
Right.
And they should all be dead because Indira basically opened up with an M249 directly at their faces.
Yep. And that just would not, it just wouldn't work. I was annoyed by that entire scene. So anyway, and they could have at least given Elton some kind of cool thing.
Prosthetic. Well, he
Yeah.
apparently woke up from his amputation and like immediately got on the road.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, like that was also a complete crappy twist where Asha runs up as Iris is about to leave for Portland. She goes, it's Elton, sad face.
Yeah.
He's awake, happy face. And you're just like, screw you, Asha. I would have slapped her if I was there.
Yep.
You can't do that. It's like that doctor in Arrested Development. I forget. He would give those one-liners. He's gone or something. Yeah, he checked himself out. It wasn't like he's dead. Either way. That was a total dick move by Asha. Then apparently he just woke up and then was like, yep, okay. Yeah, amputation was a success. I'm going to just walk to Portland. And I agree. It would have been nice to give him something, but I don't think they had time because they were walking to Portland the whole time.
Yeah. But that's about it. And and it was that.
There's still Julia Ormond.
Yep. And then Julia Ormond obviously gets betrayed by Jadis, which I don't think is too shocking. I think what's shocking is her reaction and being shocked by it. Which is fine.
Yeah, Jadis is not subtle about her ambition, as she even calls herself out on it. She's like, I don't have kids, I just have my ambition and this place. So for Julia Ormond, who her character Kublek seemed to be pretty savvy.
Yeah, I don't think she would have been surprised. I also don't think she, that didn't fit in as well as other things. I don't know. It just felt very, very forced. And implausible given what we had seen of her up until this point. And I guess that's the piece with everybody, like Huck, Jadis, all these characters that they've tried to sort of, specifically with Huck and Huck's death, we've seen, they spent all this time building Huck into this character. We saw all of her backstory and we saw enough of it that it's very hard to believe that she could be taken out by somebody like Jadis.
Yeah.
Same thing with Kublek. They've like very much built her up into this like very politically savvy to the detriment of her own personal life character. So much so that I just have a very hard time believing that she wouldn't have somehow protected herself against Jadis's machinations. And in fact, she's been away from the research facility. And I kind of assumed she was stirring up or doing her own thing wherever she was. But apparently she's just sitting by a lake waiting to be arrested.
Jadis has a call with the General Beale, not on camera, but like she's talking to him and she just says to him, after everything has gone terribly, I just wish I'd been sent here sooner so that I could have stopped this. When frankly, everything bad happened on her watch.
Correct.
And she kind of accuses Julia or Kublek later of being like, you brought me in to take the fall for your incompetence. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like the power outage, I think happened right when you were there. Like all of your security protocols that you were overseeing at the time failed.
Yeah, it was all her. And so that just didn't feel right to me. But in any case,
when they eventually show her character biting the bullet, maybe in a Rick Grimes movie or whatever, however they're going to do it, it'll be pretty sweet. She is a pretty good villain at this point. I will give him that too. But
She
it's
is, and she also gave away a little bit of what happened to Rick. The fact that she told him that them he was a B instead of an A, and if he was an A, he would have ended up in the lab,
mhm.
be experimented upon. I don't know what that means. But it gave us some hint of Rick, which was, interesting at least, and more information that we had. I mean, she implied it before, but we now know at least what sort of would have happened with
Yeah.
the him if she had, and she's like, oh, I owed him that much.
And the internet theories had kind of jumped to that conclusion way before she made that acknowledgement. So it
Right,
was
but
kind of
they
out
made
there.
it overt in this case.
So let's quickly talk about the Dr. Jenner French scenes. There isn't a whole lot that's revealed here. He talks a little. He's kind of just doing a monologue into the camera, talking about some discoveries that the French had made. What's Dr. Jenner's name?
I don't know. What do you know?
I'm gonna look it up.
You mean the actor?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant like
Noah Emmerich.
Okay.
Noah Emmerich. It's great to see him, right? Like, and he's clearly like more optimistic than he is when we meet him at the end of season 1 of The Walking Dead Prime. Like,
Yep.
he's super defeated. Then there's nobody else on camera, so you don't know if his wife is still alive.
Right.
But he seems to be animated in the way he's talking into the camera and excited about research and outcomes. So, this could be a week or two before Rick's group shows up at the door to the CDC building, or who knows. And like a lot of that's probably about half of the scene is him talking into the camera and this lady sitting at her laptop watching him before she is interrupted by a smoking non-native French speaker.
Yeah.
You heard his accent too, right?
It was bad. It was bad.
And I mean, was this France or was this Canada?
I think it's supposed to be France only because of how they were asking about where the conference was, and
Toledo.
she laughs and says Ohio.
Yeah.
And
Jenner had said to Rick's group that he'd been in touch with France, or France had still been up and running recently or something.
Right. So I feel like it is definitely France. I don't know. This guy clearly was not like a native French speaker, but I didn't know, how he ended up there or what. But no, clearly his French was terrible.
Not terrible. It's just his French was. I don't know if his French was terrible. Honestly,
not terrible, but it's clearly that he's not a native speaker of French, or at least that's what I was under that impression. So we have.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I don't know if you watched this because I watched this with the subtitles,
mm-hmm.
and then I had to watch it with it off because the subtitles were picking up all the things that Dr. Jenner was saying.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Which actually gives a little bit of information, and it kind of talks about these different variants, the things that he's doing in tandem with the French lab, and that he's waiting to see their results because and that certain things were promising and all of that. And then you have the exchange between this woman and the guy who has caught her, and making references to different teams.
Primrose and Violet.
Yep. That were responsible for this whole thing. And so, you get the impression that this was supposed to be something that was like a treatment of some kind and got out of control, and that they kept trying to fix it and it got worse. And that's why all of this happened.
Those are the two major accusations that he makes when she's like, I was hoping that there might be someone from Primrose here. But I think they were all in Ohio, I think is what she's saying. Right. And he's like, look, it's your fault this happened and you made it worse. Yeah. So those are the two major kind of like, whoa, revelations. And then right after that exchange, I feel like you hear Jenner say, and what's this about these variants? We're not seeing that at all. Yep. And you're not sure when he's saying that if he doesn't, because he's also just been talking in like medical jargon. He's talking about like steroidal, but then I think we get a real better picture of the variant once the smoking guy shoots the doctor, and then kind of leaves quickly, right? Like he turns on his heel and pedals out of there.
Yep. And then we see a very, very quick transformation, and we see probably the fastest zombie. I think we've never seen a zombie this fast, that quickly.
Yeah.
And also a strategic thinking zombie, because she goes right to the same place. Like she tries to get out the door where he came from.
Yeah.
So those are like all very different than what we have seen in at least our world of Walking Dead.
And she's also denting that door, and that is a
Yep,
metal
she's
door.
strong.
It's not like, you know, a xenomorph in Aliens denting a pressure door, but it's like a little bit of metal denting there that makes you think, oh, this thing is hitting that door very hard. You know, not like super strength, but maybe a little. You know. So I think the internet has been blowing up with these sorts of discoveries since this show ended. We'll have to see if this becomes something that the anthology approaches later on, or if it's going to show up in other episodes of the Walking Dead universe.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see where they go from here. I also feel like maybe they have left the door open for potentially Silas to make an appearance, possibly. Like I felt like
All of these surviving cast members could.
Him, I'm thinking maybe more so only because of his connection with Jadis and that sort of almost warning she gave about him owing her.
Yeah.
So, you know, so we'll have to see. But overall, I just thought that this series could have been a lot better. And I think that's what's disappointing me. But as I said, this last scene almost made it worth it, but made me more wish they had focused on something more like this. Because I think, you know, one of the things we've been really hoping to see, and one of the things that they were hinting at before this particular series came out, is that we would get to see what things were like in the rest of the world. You know, like, and they had hinted about that. I don't know if you recall, but they had hinted about things being in France and or in Europe, and we got like really excited about it. And then clearly that's not what happened, except at the very end. So I guess they semi kept their promise, but it was slightly manipulative. But really, what I was hoping is that it would be more stuff like we saw in that post-credit scene.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like the sort of plot line we got was what, you know, was what we were hoping for when they first started sort of advertising the show.
I mean, we always knew this was going to be YA. So
right? But that doesn't bother me as much as long as it's like well done. And I just don't think it was. So well executed, I should say.
Yeah.
But
and
anyway,
you know, I'm a little sad that if we want to see Elton again, he's probably going to be with Iris.
I know, but maybe not. Maybe they can. I don't know. Maybe he can do his own thing. Who knows? But I know.
Yeah. So this show ended up with a 47% overall on Rotten Tomatoes, 46%, 37% average audience score. So pretty dismal. And then that was based on that average that critical rating is from basically from the first season only. Second season, it has no critical rating because people haven't been reviewing it, and there's no more damning thing for a show, I think, than when the critics stop even writing about the show.
Right.
So that was pretty hardcore. And I think I would agree. I think 37 from the audience is kind of around where I am with it.
Yeah.
There were like here and there fun things to look at, like Felix's final fight with Newton, some of Jadis's comments, some of Huck's stuff, Silas finally being like activated as a character, but why did it have to take this long? And Elton through the whole series. The sisters I never really enjoyed that much. But although the science that they were working on, that like aggressively deteriorating yeast stuff that they kind of hinted at the end of the show, that's cool too. But some of the characterization just really did not work out for me in this series.
Yeah. Agree.
So, I mean, we were both dead wrong that Leo was going to die. I don't know how he made it, but Leo and the scientists are still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's puzzling that he made it. It really is. I thought for sure him and Will were done. Um, but you know,
Not nearly as many of the quote unquote goodies died. I
no,
thought they were really gonna, because it's a Walking Dead show, and it was
yeah.
a Walking Dead show with a hard, 2-season cap. I was like, no way. They're gonna have to kill off like 30 of these nameless scientists and all these
Well, I
other
thought
people.
like I honestly thought that Indira's whole colony would be done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thought most of the scientists would be done and left for like, I kind of thought that that's how it was going to play out, is that the majority of the adults were going to be taken out and it was going to be left with the 4 kids, to
Yeah,
then sort of figure things out. And that's not what happened.
not what happened. Elton even manages to steal Indira like 2 little trays of her special medicine, and she's like, "This is what I needed to live." I'm like, "For how long? Is that gonna is that years? What you have right there?" I feel like she's still in hot water, but
Yeah.
well, yeah. So yeah, we can stop talking about the world beyond now, and we never have to talk about it again. And I think that's probably going to be good for me.
Yeah, same. So what are we going to talk about next time?
So I think we need to take a little break from a series because we went straight from Midnight Mass into this, right? And
Right.
I know we have a lot of Fear the Walking Dead still to catch up on. But what do you say that we take a hack at one of those? Yeah, like we talked about it earlier, that Night of the Creeps from the list that we looked at
Let's
earlier.
do it. We'll do a little palate cleanser and then we'll figure out what's next. Lots of stuff coming up. I definitely, I think we will have to talk about Fear the Walking Dead at some point. But I do want to review All of Us Are Dead, probably pretty close to its release. So,
Yeah. And that's in 3 weeks.
yep. So
Exciting.
yeah, so let's do that for next time. And if you have any comments on the finale of The World Beyond, please send us a note, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us, reanimatedpcast is the handle, or you can just leave a note on our site, which is reanimatedpodcast.com. And as always, thanks for listening. And until next time, ciao.
Alrighty. Thank you and bye.